myself and Flavia Coleman, who's in there with the tea and coffee, we've set up some talking groups and coordinating people to come and talk to our community about what we're up against on lots of different ways. What we're up against and what we want to do as a community and how we can reclaim some voice within what's happening and what's being rolled out in our world and in our community. So it's wonderful to have here with us today. We've got Naomi Cook and Steve Galvin. Where's Steve? He's there. So how we're going to do this, the whole talk is on 5G, EMFs, EMRs and ways to mitigate them, and also understanding about the smart cities. And we're going to start, how we're going to start is with Naomi Cook. So Naomi is a former registered nurse who is working with Australians and Sydney for safe technology. You're going to be talking about health effects of EMFs and ways to mitigate them. And then Steve's going to be talking more, focusing on smart cities and our local areas and sort of initiatives and ways we can start getting active there. How we're going to run is Naomi will talk and present for close to an hour. There'll be some time for question and answers to Naomi, then we'll have a short break and then we'll go on to Steve, and then he will also have question and answers. And then if we have any time after that, because we finish at 3, if we have any time after that, we can open it up to ideas or thoughts or whatever else, where we get to organically by that stage. If everyone can please turn their phones off or onto airplane mode. Anything else? That was pretty much it. Bathrooms are just out and to the right if you need a bathroom as well. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Hi everybody. Hello. It's nice to see some new faces, and thanks for having us here today. So my name's Naomi. I am a former registered nurse. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story. Did that change slides? Hang on. I'm not used to this computer. Does that work? Yeah. Okay, cool. Okay, so I got involved with the 5G movement in 2019, as did some other gorgeous people in this room. That was the year that really across Australia and across the world really, there was this explosion of awareness in 5G. So we started our groups, the little local groups, big national group, there's Australians for Safe Technology. So I got involved with that. I thought, I was a registered nurse then, and I thought, this hasn't had any biological safety testing, so people really need to know about this and start talking about this. So I thought, what I'll do, on my Facebook page, where I had a bit of a following, I thought, I'll talk about it a bit, and I'll get people talking about it, and then I'm just going to sit back down, get in my garden and do my permaculture and let everybody else get on with it, because I really had no interest in becoming an activist. By the end of 2019, I reluctantly accepted that I had become a safe tech activist. And I still am. I'm still doing it 3 years later. So I spoke at a few rallies about 5G, and I got approached by the ABC, who do the Four Corners documentary. And I got interviewed by them. And I thought, okay, but you know what? It was a whole hour, the interview, and I talked about the science, I talked about our very legitimate health concerns that 5G hadn't had a single biological safety test, and I thought, this is good. Not good. They really edited the interview. It's not surprising. They just pulled out fluff and really silly facial expressions. And the media went after me. There was some public backlash with a Twitter hashtag, #deregister Cook, that I only found really recently, actually, which I feel quite flattered about. So I had multiple complaints lodged against me to the HCCC, and I was called in to the Nursing Council for a counselling. So I went with my lawyer to have my counselling session. Before I had my counselling session, I sent them in about 8,000 words of science that I was using to back up the work that I was doing. So this is, for me, evidence-based practice. I was using peer-reviewed studies to support what I was talking about in the public arena. Anyway, they really didn't like me very much. So I asked them outright when I was there. I said, am I going against my nursing code of conduct to talk about 5G in public? And they said yes. They're kind of right, because the nursing code of conduct says that you have to, you can only support what is accepted. It's So basically the accepted narrative. You can't talk publicly about things that they are not saying is right or wrong or true or false. So you have to support mainstream health messaging. And the mainstream health messaging at that time and now is that 5G is safe, even though it hasn't had biological safety testing. Anyway, so I decided then I would surrender my nursing registration. I wasn't working clinically, so I wasn't losing a job, I wasn't losing an income, so it was quite an easy decision for me to do. Step down, become a former registered nurse, and continue to do the work that I'm very passionate about and enjoy, which is talking about safe tech. So I'm also a children's author. I write health-themed picture books for kids that are available in all good bookshops. They're not always in stock, you have to get them ordered in, but they're called The Little Bush Nurse. And my Telegram channel is Naomi Cook, former registered nurse. My Facebook page is Tinkerbell Former Fairy. It used to be former nurse, but it really was inviting too much media attention, backlash, and trolling. So Fairy was much easier to go by, and still is easier to go by. So that's me. So whenever we start talking about the health effects of electromagnetic radiation, microwave radiation, the average response that you're going to get from the average Facebook troll or the average person on Facebook is, but it's non-ionizing. That's what they respond with. Our safety standards that have been created to assess for heating effects. So they are supposed to protect individuals against getting cooked, like being in a microwave, for example. But they are ignoring the fact that there are non-thermal biological effects. So that is effects on the human body that can occur before you get cooked. So humans are electromagnetic in nature. In the 1700s, they knew this. They used to have electricity parties when they just discovered how to make electricity. And they used to stand in circles and pass electricity through each other, and they loved it, right? It was the cool thing to have electricity parties. And they also started using electricity for healing purposes then as well. So they were using it therapeutically. But what they discovered was that individuals who were using electricity a lot, namely those who were doing the research or the ones who were using it for healing purposes, those who were very exposed to electricity, some of them began to develop a disorder that they called neurasthenia. These days, this would be called EHS, electromagnetic hypersensitivity, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. So humans are electromagnetic. Our cells are electrically sensitive. Many of the cells in our body have a voltage gate, electrically sensitive, and these voltage gates get activated when there are changes outside the cell. So some sort of extracellular change can stimulate the opening of the voltage gate, which can lead to changes in the cell. When there are changes in the cell, you then have often changes outside the cell, and then things happen in the body. We also know that we have bodily systems themselves that are electric in nature. Cardiac function, the nervous system, and the brain. Humans are electromagnetic. Our redox system, our reductance and oxidants capability, these molecules are at the core of cellular communication. We talk about redox in terms of potential, and it's expressed in volts. Humans are electromagnetic. Just to drum that home a little bit more, when the heart stops, we use electrical forces to bring it back. We measure the brain through looking at electrical function. And then there's emerging areas of science too. So we've got this really basic stuff. Everybody should really know, if they think about it, that humans are electromagnetic, the cells and the organs, for example. But there are emerging areas of science. So I wouldn't say mainstream science, but science that is emerging and looking at, I guess, what spiritual traditions would call auric fields. But these emerging areas of science are looking at electromagnetic fields that are generated. The Heart Math Institute, has anybody here heard? Yes, so you've heard of the Heart Math. So they're looking at the fields of the heart, and they're studying how it can impact upon individuals who are within the vicinity of somebody who has, they call it coherent or non-coherent states of being. This is emerging science. Again, Spiritual traditions may talk about this in terms of auric fields, but emerging science may look at this in terms of the human biofield. So this imagery is taken by this Russian scientist, I think it's Korokotov. I don't know how to pronounce it. I had fun trying to practice that. So he's created this camera. He calls it the gas discharge visualization camera. You put your finger into his little device and it maps the electrical state of the fingerprint but applies it to the human body. So if you have a look like this one there, you can have a look at the human biofield there. They call this homogeneous. It's pretty equal, and there's no perforations in the biofield, whereas this one here has some breaks in integrity of the biofield. Again, this is emerging science. It's not mainstream science, but what they would suggest is that an individual who has great energetic integrity in their biofield may be less prone to developing disease because there is less dis-ease in the biofield. Therefore, when you get to the state of this stage here, disease may be manifesting in terms of the cells. But this is just emerging science, but I will refer back to this a little bit later when I'm looking at ways to mitigate EMR. I just wanted to refer to it now because I find it fascinating. I have this quote in here because we gave this talk a few weeks back at the Rudolf Steiner House in Sydney CBD. I just find it so interesting because this guy said this before we had cell phone towers, before we had mobile phones, before we had, we just had, lights? So he said electricity is so pervasive. How pervasive was it then? Literally, really. It was so pervasive in the lives of modern humans that it gets on our nerves. And he said that our sensitivity to electricity has made it impossible to maintain a connection to the spiritual. He's also said that basically when the air was not swarming with electrical influences, it was easier to be human. And now, back then, they had to work harder to connect to their spiritual self. How radical is that? Because that was before AI. That was before everyone was sucked into this, virtual world that they carry around with them that's literally glued to their hands. So I find that quite interesting. So I fantasize daily about somebody creating a device that we could bring into a public sphere and demonstrate to individuals what our airwaves now look like. This is just an artistic overlay. And he's just imagined if we could see, this probably is emissions from what he would, I guess it would be from cell phone tower because a Wi-Fi router wouldn't be inside a building. This could be, say, imagine it's from cell phone towers. So he's just drawn what that might look like if we could see it. So imagine thinking, I'm going to go and sit, on some green grass. I'm going to go sit in nature for a couple of hours, and thinking that you're really plugging into the frequencies of Mother Earth. You don't actually know that this is happening in the air around you. It's just visuals, and more visuals here. So this was a project that was put together by a research team at Newcastle University. They've called it light painting Wi-Fi. They think it's beautiful. I think colours are beautiful, but I find this really, really disturbing. So, as a parent, if my child was, say, in this room here, and I had a choice for where my daughters were going to spend, 6 hours of their school day, would I choose to put my child in the centre of that discordant, chaotic waveform, or that? Or would I choose maybe to the side, If we could see it, if we could hear it, if we could smell it, then there would be so much, obviously, more awareness, but people just, they don't think, they can't see it, they can't smell it, they can't hear it, and it doesn't exist to them. But the reality is, we're surrounded by these bubbles all the time. If your phone's in your pocket and it's on, all the time. You go to bed at night, your phone's next to your head, all the time. So I'm going to just reel off on the next slide some of the biological health effects that have been discovered in thousands of peer-reviewed studies. But I haven't referenced them because they're all collated. But just so you know, you can find, am I standing in the way? I don't know if I am. You can find these studies on a site called the Bio Initiative. So they've basically listed loads of peer-reviewed studies that have found biological harm from non-thermal levels of microwave radiation. So this is, again, radiation from cell phones, Wi-Fi, that has a biological health effect before heating occurs, okay? So Bioinitiative report, and also ORSA, which is an Australian group of PhD scientists, and they collate, they whatever gets published that has found biological health effects, they collate it, and they're all there in one place. So what are some of the non-thermal health effects of microwave radiation? I'll go over here for a moment and just have a change of scenery. So we've got changes to reproduction and fertility. In males, this is changes to testes structure and function, testosterone levels, sperm quality is affected. It has been found that there are cognitive changes in the brain, neuropsychiatric effects. DNA damage. So you know in the first slide I showed you the tinfoil hatter and the troll always says, but it's non-ionizing. We know ionizing radiation does damage DNA. So does non-ionizing. Okay, but it's not through an instant break to the DNA bonds. It occurs through free radical damage or oxidative stress. So it is still genotoxic in certain quantities. There are changes to cardiac activity, irregular heartbeats, elevated heartbeats, sudden cardiac death. This is the one that I want to talk about, I want you to remember after today. So it has been found that exposure to electromagnetic radiation, EMR or EMS, causes oxidative cell damage. This is basically a rusting of the cell. So why is this bad? Oxidative cell damage has been found to be the cornerstone to many disease processes. If you have oxidative stress, then you will most likely develop inflammation. If you have inflammation, pick your disease. Abnormal cell growth, cancer, autoimmune, neurological. Lupus, so autoimmune disease, exactly. Depending what other things are happening in your environment and your own genetic pathways, if you have oxidative stress and it isn't dealt with, it isn't tackled, there will be inflammation, and then at some point along the way, disease will unfold. Oxidative stress occurs with the aging process too, so if we're constantly battling against the aging process itself and then the environmental toxins, but EMR causes oxidative stress. Cancer. This is a funny one, but it's not funny at all. But it kind of is. So I don't know how many years ago this was. Let me just see how many years, guys, was the NTP? Just looking at this. Trying to find the date on this study. A few years ago, the FDA in the States decided that they wanted to prove for once and for all that mobile phones did not cause cancer. Because there was talk in the community, what do they cause cancer? They're going to prove it. So I think they gave the NTP, which is the National Toxicology Program, I think 26 million. I think it was $26 million to create a study with rats to demonstrate that mobile phones didn't cause cancer. And so why did they choose rats? So whenever you're assessing for whether or not an agent is going to cause cancer, you're not going to get ethics approval to test it on humans first. You have to do it on animals. So anything that may cause cancer, you have to test on animals first. And if it does cause cancer, it'd be very hard to get ethics approval to then do that study on humans if the animals get cancer. So that's why they chose rats. So this was a really well set up study, okay, because they were going to prove this. But I'm just going to give you this quote. So the experimental design of this study was presented to scientists from, I won't list them out, but they list a lot of organizations that basically heard about this design at an annual meeting of the Bioelectromagnetic Society in 2003. That's when it was, 2003. Okay, it doesn't mean that humans get it. So this is the kind of, it's just absolutely ridiculous. Anyway, so there is a chance that EMR will cause cancer. If you have oxidative cell damage anyway, then you have a risk of abnormal cell growth. So sleep disruption is another one. It can impact upon your ability to produce adequate levels of melatonin, which is a sleep hormone. Also, melatonin is a really potent antioxidant molecule. Antioxidant means that it would help to mop up any oxidative cell damage that could occur during the day. But imagine if you're exposed during the day, you're building up oxidative stress, and then at night you're not creating enough melatonin, you've got this double whammy, because the body can't even begin to mitigate. So how does it actually impact with the biology? I mean, when I studied nursing, for example, there were no conversations about the biophysical interaction, the biology meeting physics, nothing. But there are emerging theories on what happens. One emerging theory, and in fact this has actually been demonstrated by Professor Martin Poole, he said that EMR stimulates one of the voltage-gated channels, so that he would say the voltage-gated calcium channel, which leads to an influx of calcium ions in the cell. So normally, if the body wants calcium ions in the cell, that's no problem. But imagine if the cell, the voltage gate is perpetually being stimulated to open, and there's a perpetual influx of calcium ions, which isn't natural for the body. He says that leads to oxidative stress. And as I said, you have oxidative stress, you have inflammation, and then you have your downstream health effects. Over the years that I've been reading these studies as they've been coming out, I read the studies that find biological harm, and I read the ones that don't. It's funny how the studies that don't find biological harm often have funding that comes from telecommunications. I don't know why, but it's funny, the articles, in science, you should be constantly thinking, what if? Whereas I've read perspectives in these articles that are kind of saying, well, we don't know how EMR could interface with biology and non-thermal effects, therefore it doesn't exist type of attitude. Like it's really crazy. Anyway, again, we are electromagnetic, even if we don't have all the answers for how this stuff impacts upon our biology. If it's the biofield, if it's the heart, if it's cells, whatever, we haven't got all the answers. Science is always expanding and moving forward, so we are electromagnetic, therefore we can't rule out. Huge things are happening to our physiology at the moment. It's interesting too how EMFs and EMR can actually be used therapeutically and is used therapeutically in some settings. So bone growth, for example, certain frequencies can actually help bone growth. So okay, so there is a biological interaction there. Yeah, well there is when you want there to be one. Also, it's been suggested that using it to help the brain uptake chemotherapeutic drugs. So the blood-brain barrier is usually locked shut to protect the brain from toxins in the blood. But certain frequencies of EMR open the blood-brain barrier. So if you want to get something into the brain, that could be a really good thing. But it's not so good if you're at home, using your Wi-Fi, and then there's toxic cars chugging out pollution in the street nearby, and your blood-brain barrier is open, and stuff is getting into your bloodstream. So also back to Martin Poole, he said that pulsed fields are more biologically interactive than non-pulsed fields. So our Wi-Fi, our phone, cell phone towers often deliver pulsed radio waves. I don't know if this will show pulsing now because I know that a lot of the phones are on flight mode. But okay, so yeah, it is. So actually, you know what it is? It would be the Bluetooth there. So so you see how the meter moves back and forth. So pulsed waves are more biologically interactive than non-pulsed waves. And he's also said that throughout a frequency spectrum, there are windows that are more interactive than other windows. How do we know which windows are more interactive unless we've tested them? So let's use 5G as an example, because this is rolling out now, and we all know that 3G and 4G is the same. But let's just go with the 5G, yeah? So 5G starts at around, actually it was 3.5 gigahertz when it first came out, but let's just say 10 gigahertz to 300 gigahertz. You've got this whole window of what 5G is, and in that massive window, you've got different windows that may be more biologically interactive than others. So how do we know which ones could cause more harm? Like if we actually knew, Wouldn't it be cool if we could like choose a window that may cause less biological damage? But we don't know, because the testing's not been done. So right now on the cell phone towers, they're chugging out 26 gigahertz. Is that more biologically interactive than if it was 24? Don't know. The other thing is, in that whole range, we've got pulsations and nanopulsations. So if pulsed waveforms are more biologically interactive, and you've got different pulsations and nanopulsations in this whole spectrum, how could you even ever really test 5G for safety? Because this is like, that would take forever to test each thing. Like, it's just impossible to test it. I just wanted to give you another visual of how the body can change when exposed to microwave radiation. This wasn't a published study, it was a paper created by Beverly Rubric. It was for a conference. And it's using like a live blood analysis of finger prick, looking at red blood cells. So this one here wasn't actually in her study, but she chose it to demonstrate what a really beautiful collection of red blood cells looks like under the microscope. Everything looks nice, yeah? The second one in was her baseline finger prick from a 75-year-old test subject. So obviously there's the aging process going on there. If you compare, I don't know how old the individual was in that one there, but it doesn't look as good, does it? So this was at baseline. So in her study, her test subjects had to not be exposed to EMR for a certain number of hours before the test. But my question would be, gosh, that's pretty challenging because, you know, maybe in your home, you turn off the Wi-Fi, but you have to get in the car to go to the test center. So many cell phone towers on the way. Even walking into the test center, what if there's a Wi-Fi? Like, actually getting a complete clean slate would be really difficult. Plus, we don't know how this individual here actually mitigates any oxidative damage that she has. So, but this was her baseline. This picture here, you can see rouleau stacking. So in this picture here, she simply entered into test conditions. She wore a backpack with her mobile phone switched on and just sat in a room. Just from wearing a phone that's switched on. This one here, and I don't know how long it was in between studies and how, you know, she got them back to baseline, I don't know. I should email her because I really love this work. This was after using a phone for, I think, 3 to 4 hours. So they've got clear stacking. Here, I don't know if you can see, but this is like really, really misshapen membranes around the red blood cells, and then there's stuff inside them. I don't have the language to, I'm not trained to analyze it, but just looking at it, you kind of think, it really doesn't look very good. Doesn't look good at all. And again, this doesn't mean that you're going to get cancer if you have blood that looks like this. It doesn't mean you're going to get an autoimmune disease. It's not, we can't say that, but we can just say, intuitively speaking, if you knew just by putting your phone in your bag that's going to happen to your red blood cells, might make you think twice. Might make you want to modify your behavior or the behavior of your kids. So I mentioned in the 1700s they had these electricity parties and that some individuals developed neurasthenia. Electromagnetic hypersensitivity is a condition that individuals develop when they develop very difficult symptoms when they're exposed to electromagnetics. There's a couple of things I want to say about it. We're all sensitive because, as I've demonstrated, and we all know, we're all electromagnetic. And there has to be biological implications for everybody who is exposed. But some develop symptoms. So it has been said that those with EHS are the canaries in the coal mine. They're the ones that can feel it. We should listen to them. Many of us don't feel it. Arthur Furstenberg, who wrote the book The Invisible Rainbow, I don't know if you've heard of that book, it's a really good book. It was a history of electricity, basically. He said that calling somebody hypersensitive is basically as crazy as saying that somebody is hypersensitive to cyanide. So he's seeing it as an environmental poison that we should be having symptoms from because it's a poison, it's not a healthy thing. So those with EHS, though, often do have I guess, some factors that may predispose them to developing EHS. So individuals with already existing, or perhaps they don't know it, but multiple chemical sensitivity, so those who are sensitive to fragrances, synthetic and also natural, those with food sensitivities, those with mold toxicity and heavy metal toxicity. I read a really good paper this week actually by Mary Redmayne, and she talks about electromagnetic illness as a different thing from electromagnetic hypersensitivity. She would say that, you know, people who get illness from it will not necessarily develop EHS, the hypersensitivity. So I'm just going to read you a quote from this paper. I can find it. Okay. So she says that our current model of electrosensitivity is basically everyone. Everyone is electrosensitive, yet tick box, we've discussed that today. And she says that having differing responses to our exposure is a normal part of being alive. That makes perfect sense. She says, for some who do not appear to respond, who don't get symptoms, there will still be cellular impacts. And she said for most, these will promptly be repaired. So I like her optimism. I really do. I think I'm a bit more pessimistic, just because when are people not exposed? If they're not actually aware that there is a biological interaction going on, when are they not exposed? Because they have to have a Wi-Fi router. They don't turn it off at night, and they've got a Bluetooth speaker on the landing and their phone in their bedroom. How are they even going to begin to mitigate the cellular damage that is occurring? But anyway, she says that, so we can be optimistic. And then she says for some, damage will gradually or eventually accumulate and may lead in time to a catastrophic response in the form of a disease that began as oxidative stress, that the body has fought, but obviously finally succumbed to. She says for others, effects will be felt and cause early symptoms. So this is electromagnetic illness. Among those, some will respond then by avoiding exposure, consciously or subconsciously, but again, really difficult, isn't it, to avoid exposure? How, right? And then others will ignore the symptoms and then pay the price, and others will go on to develop EHS. So EHS, she says, she sees it more of an allergic response in that the body is so sensitized that you get symptoms and you know that it's because you just, when I put on that Bluetooth headset, a microphone, I instantly got a buzzing in my ears. Anyway, so what are the symptoms of EHS? There's loads of symptoms, but headaches, difficulties concentrating, depression, anxiety, random shooting pains in the body, muscle weakness, sleep problems, chronic fatigue, ringing in the ears, and loads more. But it's really difficult to diagnose because the connection with exposure isn't always obvious because we're always exposed. Like, when are we not? So it's really, really hard. So how could you even begin to diagnose it? You could try eliminating your exposure and then reintroducing it. But again, if you've got to go to the shops and there's a big cell phone tower there, tricky, really, really tricky. I'm really thankful for the work of a French researcher called Belpom, and what he's done is he has found that there are very specific markers in the blood, specific oxidative stress markers. He's found a higher in individuals with EHS, so he would say, look at the symptom picture, look at if you can correlate exposure and symptoms, but this is really tough. And then he has his biomarkers, and he looks at certain heat shock proteins and certain indicators of oxidative stress. So his work is amazing. If his work could be adopted, that may actually then lead to an ability to have EHS or electromagnetic illness even easily diagnosable. Because right now, does anyone hear EHS that they know of, or know anyone with EHS? Yeah, it's being in the system. I have a child who's been through the system with this, and it's really not easy. So keep watching the space for this dude, because I like what he's doing in science. So ways to reduce exposure. Turning off your Wi-Fi at night, number one. Like, you can do that like right now. Turn off the Wi-Fi at night. Best thing to do would be to get Ethernet cables to hardwire your house. An Ethernet connection is so much better. It's fast and it's smooth, it never cuts out. So Ethernet cables are brilliant. If you have a Wi-Fi router that we have an on-off button for the Wi-Fi. Some Wi-Fi routers just have Wi-Fi on all the time, you can't turn it off. But you can get some routers where you can turn off the Wi-Fi. So you have the Wi-Fi off, have your Ethernet going to the computer and whatever. This is reducing one source of exposure at home by 100% instantly the moment you get Ethernet cables. I have an Ethernet adapter for my phone. Some are rubbish. Don't get any off eBay because they don't work. This one is a Red Park adapter. So I have an Ethernet cable going into my kitchen. Then I have a little connecting Ethernet connector with 2 female ports. Plug in one end, then this connects to my phone. It's not as reliable as having Ethernet to the computer, which the computer always recognizes Ethernet connection. On the phone, you have to keep prompting it. Yes, you are connected to the internet, but it's really good for uploading videos to social media, things like that, photos, things that we generate a lot of EMR. It's really good to have one of these. On my Tinkerbell Former Fairy Facebook page, I have a video that I made in January. And I'm demonstrating how you can reduce the EMR coming off your smartphone in literally 2 seconds. If you put your phone on flight mode, which my phone basically lives on flight mode, I'll switch it on to get messages through, see what's going on, put it back on flight mode. If you have the Wi-Fi option switched on and the Bluetooth option switched on, even on flight mode, the phone will be giving off masses of EMR. So I have a video demonstrating that. I have a little meter and it's flashing green and then it goes red and it will show you everything if you look under my videos. So if you want to reduce the EMR coming off your phone and make it basically completely inert, next to your kids, next to you, have it on flight mode but have the Bluetooth and the Wi-Fi switched off. Bluetooth is a very high source of EMR. So basically, I don't use Bluetooth, so no speakers at home, everything's wired. And many Bluetooth devices, even when they're turned off, will give off EMR. I don't know why, but they do. So yes, don't use Bluetooth if you can. Obviously today we have to have that speaker, but not everybody knows about Bluetooth. People, young kids wearing their Bluetooth, literally cooking their brains with their earpods. I mean, there is still, I have wired headphones, there is still electrical currents going up the headphones. You can get some little devices that are supposed to block it and mitigate it. I really don't know if they work, but this is still better than having Bluetooth earpods. Many devices in the home will give off EMR even when they are switched off. So Apple TV is one of those. If it's plugged in, but it's not on, it will give off EMR. So if you just unplug it, then when you want to watch a movie or watch Apple TV, just plug it in. So again, you're reducing your exposure instantly by just pulling out a plug. Same with the DVD player as well. So many of these home devices will just give off EMR if that's plugged in. And then I would recommend, if you're very interested in having like a really safe green home, like green as in like, not as in like green, but green as in like EMR readings. I would recommend getting a really good builder biologist in because solar panels can give off high amounts of dirty electricity. So dirty electricity is electricity in the wiring of your house, but intermittently it leaks a few feet or meters into the room, and then why it does it, I don't know. But there's a biological interaction with that. So now the smart meter obviously gives off high amounts of radio frequency, and if you can avoid having one, that's great. So I recently got I think it was a letter or an email saying that my analog meter would be replaced with a digital, probably smart meter, but there was an opt-out option, so I opted out of that. If you've got a smart meter, but you want to mitigate whatever is coming off it, or has anyone here managed to get a smart meter taken down? Yeah?
No, not taken down, just didn't have it installed.
Didn't have it installed? Yeah, right, yeah. Yeah, because I don't know if you can actually get them taken down. I mean, there has to be a way, but it's really hard. Once they put the smart meter in, it's really hard to then get it out.
I found that if you put like
lead sheet or something between the wall and the smart meter
Yes.
that will mitigate?
Yes, exactly. So there may be ways to mitigate it, and a builder biologist would be amazing to talk to, because they also create dirty electricity as well. So, and there are ways that you can mitigate that with certain plug-in devices, but you have to find the right ones. There's so much on the market, you just don't want to get anything that you find, because it's expensive testing all these things. So yes, so that's about the building biology. People often ask me, like over the last 3 years, they've been saying, well, what about, this sticker that I've got on my phone that helps to harmonize waves? What about this necklace? And I'm a sucker for, I love stuff like that. I love these things. But I don't really invest in many of them. So I think the jury is really still out on, I guess, types of jewelry and things on the phone that claim to, in some way, mitigate or help buffer the radiation coming off these devices. So how could you even really test it? Like, how could you actually, so people say to me, oh, well, hold this piece of shungite next to the Wi-Fi and let's see if the reading goes down. It doesn't do that. The waves are still coming out the Wi-Fi router. So if you're wearing a necklace that's supposed to help you deal with what you're exposed to, you're still being exposed. So the only way you can guarantee that you're not being exposed to harmful microwave radiation is to actually try and reduce what you're exposed to. There are shielding fabrics and stuff, which I'll talk about in a minute, which is a separate thing, but there's so much stuff out there that is supposed to harmonize your fields, and I actually have a few things, and I have just ordered another thing, but the proof, it's really, really hard to prove it. What could you look at? Could you look at your oxidative stress levels before using it, and then 6 months later? Couldn't really do that because other things cause oxidative stress as well. You couldn't do that, right? It's not a foolproof way. Could you do the live blood analysis thing? Yeah, I guess you could. That would be one thing, but then that's only looking at one thing. Like, what if other stuff's being affected? So my questions are: how can you actually really know long term if these stickers and dots and necklaces are doing what they are supposed to do? I had something else to say about that as well. What was it? Oh yeah. So and again, like, what about the human biofield? So this is why I mentioned the human biofield. So shungite is actually well known for helping to protect from radiation, actually. And you will see in the next slide there are paints you can put in your house that's supposed to block EMR, and those paints often do contain shungite. So the woman in this book, she did some studies on individuals who were exposed to Wi-Fi. So she did the biofield. She looked at the size of the energetic fields around somebody in Wi-Fi without holding shungite and then holding shungite. And she found that when they were holding shungite, their energy fields were bigger. So this seems pretty cool. And I really love shungite. But the thing is, I'm also sensitive to EMR. Even when I wear my shungite necklace, sit at my computer, I still get ringing in my ears. So nothing is foolproof. The only foolproof thing that we can do is to reduce what we're exposed to. Sorry, my throat's gone. There we go. When you can't reduce what you're exposed to, say you're on holiday or you're moving houses, just put up a big cell phone tower, and you need to do something, you can get protective fabric for your bed. It usually has silver in it. The next time I go on holiday, I will be getting one of those. I went away for 6 weeks this year overseas, and I got really sick. Cell phone towers in one country, and the other country, I was in the middle of nowhere in this beautiful idyllic barn, but the barn had a smart meter and solar panels. I was so sick at the end of the 6 weeks, so I'll be traveling with it. But I wouldn't want to sleep in that or in that permanently, because my questions would be, could there be any other health impacts of having these things around you which normally wouldn't be there? Don't know, right? So temporarily, if you're in a desperate situation and you want to reduce what you're exposed to, I would absolutely, and like I said, I'll be getting one next time I travel. But long term, better to reduce your exposure rather than block it, yeah? That's the paint I was talking about. But again, a building biologist would know more about this than me. This is not my area, but a building biologist will be able to recommend whether or not they think painting the walls with EMR blocking paint and using films on the window as well to block EMR coming through. We could all get these really cool suits and walking around like real tinfoil hats. Next time we have a meeting, you all have to wear one.
You're going to Coles or Woolies.
And then with cool hats. And then there's behavioural ways we can mitigate our exposure. So one thing that I was really encouraging people on my Facebook page to do in 2019 was having a tech-free Sunday. And this was for myself to disengage from my addiction, because we're all addicted. I don't know anybody who isn't addicted. Like they're addicted, and we work from home. We work. We have to. You know, there's so many reasons why we need to check our devices. So having a tech-free Sunday, so checking messages first thing in the morning, I have to because I want to know work-wise anybody want help, and then having all the day without it. And I even went and got myself a Canon camera because I wanted to be tech-free and not use my phone to take pictures of my beautiful permaculture garden. So now I have a nice camera as well. But I do it also to model behavior to my kids, because my kids, I've got a nearly 15-year-old and 12-year-old. They don't have smart devices. I'm very lucky that they're in environments at the moment where it's okay for them to not have smart devices. But I want to model to them conscious device use. And if you are married as well, conscious spousing, because often there's one that's on board and the other one's listening all the time. So conscious parenting and conscious spousing. So what I try and do with that with the tech-free Sunday, and then what I try and do is I have a phone spot in my house, obviously because I have my Red Path Ethernet adapter and I have the Ethernet coming into the kitchen. My phone can sit on the kitchen bench. So if I need to use my phone to check a work message, I have to remove myself from, we're in a community, we're doing something, we're talking. This device doesn't belong in this network. This is the alien. It shouldn't be that we can just whip it out of our pocket and do something. It shouldn't be integrated into our beingness. Like they are literally interwoven into the fabric of everything we do. They're there. So I try and have it in its place, like put this device in its place, literally, like in all manners. Have it in its place. Here's my kids, we're talking, okay guys, I have to remove myself from the conversation because I have to go and connect with my tech, rather than we're talking and, oh, here's my phone, So yeah, just something to have to think about. And then obviously, we need to think about our health, because even if we do all that we can do, you know, having a phone on flight mode with Bluetooth and Wi-Fi switched off, having Ethernet cables at home, taking out the plugs of things that emit EMR, we're still going to be exposed. You know, grocery shops or, you know, someone behind you in a queue, we're all going to be exposed. And anyway, I still turn on my phone to check all my messages. And I have a computer which has Wi-Fi and Bluetooth switched off, but there's electrical fields coming on. So oxidative stress is definitely a given. It's going to happen. It happens to all of us. So we all need to do conscious activities that we know will help combat oxidative stress as we age and as we're exposed to these environmental toxins. So some things are free, like immersing yourself in icy cold water. Yay! And earthing, walking around barefoot, and fasting. You even save money with fasting. Fasting is a really potent thing you can do for your health. I'm a big fan. And then taking some decent antioxidant supplements, or supplements that boost your redox and antioxidant levels. And obviously the high quality sleep, because melatonin is an antioxidant molecule. So thinking about that in the evening time, many people, probably more young people too, will be on their screens and exposed to the blue light, and the blue light impacts upon melatonin secretion. So minimizing your exposure to blue light in the hours before bed is one way to guarantee you're going to get optimum melatonin levels, and obviously reducing device usage around bedtime. I will just go back. Can I go back? I just want to go back to, yeah. meter here is the one that I've got because I'm not good with numbers. Numbers, colours and words are my thing. So this is the Safe and Sound. It's their basic meter, and you can get them on safertech.com.au. And so it's really cool because you have the green light basically shows that this is ideal. Flashing green is ideal, especially for where you're sleeping, to have a green. And then basically as the levels go up, it'll be orange and then it goes to red and extreme. So simple. And then you can detect sources in your house. You'd be surprised. You might just find a hidden source of EMR. When you found it, you can just unplug it. And they're not too expensive. I think they're about $300 compared to some, are really pricey. So it's quite a good investment. And it's visual. So if you want to educate people around you, like my mum, when I went to the UK this year, and I showed her what happened when she put her phone on flight mode, with the Bluetooth and Wi-Fi switched off compared to when it was on, she was like, oh, like it's a real thing. Like it's a real thing. If you can see it in a colour and a sound, it's real all of a sudden. So I think that is the end of my presentation. Let me just quickly go. Yes, it is. That's me. But questions? Yeah.
Yeah, so just a few questions. I know a little bit, not too much, about Nikolai Tesla's work with everything having resonance, everything having resonance. I would assume that's got something to do with everything having an EMR as well,
Yes.
electronic. How do you tell which is healthy
Exactly.
in the frequencies and which isn't? What frequencies are in those frequencies? Because obviously there can be useful health.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. It's such it's so
Like
fascinating.
you know, as a nurse, it's been used in health.
Exactly. I know, and because some devices you can plug in, and then they give off a frequency that's supposed to help mitigate the cell phone tower down the road. But how do we know? I have one friend who's very EHS, and she says having her plug-in device makes her feel better. So for her, she knows she feels better when it's plugged in. But exactly like you say, actually, this is emerging science, isn't it? Yeah.
Because what you get in the car's got electric.
Yeah.
It's more and more electronics.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You go from place to place. But
Yeah.
I mean, everything, even like you sit, I'm not,
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
you sit
Yes.
with people, you're with people, different
Exactly.
people are having aversion.
That's
as
right.
well. So, I mean, I'm not saying people are bad or anything, but how do you, why, is there any science behind which frequencies are the healthy ones and which are not so healthy?
I would say the first thing you could go back to is that I think what we're exposed to now in terms of non-native or unnatural frequencies is 1 quintillion times higher now than it was, I don't know, how many years ago? 50 years ago or 200 years ago, that was like a number, 200 years ago. So if what we're exposed to, we evolved on this planet. We've been here for how many, I don't know, how many minutes a year? How many years? History, we've been here a long time. But exactly. And all of a sudden we've had this explosion. So what we had before we were exposed to, even as Steiner was saying, electricity, was beneficial for life because life has flourished. But now, look, are we flourishing? I don't know. Who wakes up in the morning and thinks, I feel vital and alive today? Literally, we're sickened society. So what we evolved with naturally was optimum for health because we're here. But what we're exposed to now. But then in terms of man-made devices that may help, that, I'm fascinated. I want to know too, because I like stuff. So but it's emerging science. Yeah.
Nikki, I just thought it was worth pointing out to everyone that meter that you mentioned actually only picks up radio frequencies. So I just don't want people to complacent and go, because I'm walking around and it's green, that everything's fine, because there's also AC magnetic field and electric field as well.
Perfect. That's a really good point. So that's why getting a builder biologist in is the best thing to do. So that does the safer sound one only picks up radio frequency, as she's saying. This tri-field meter, for example, does pick up magnetic fields and electric fields, but again, I'm not trained really, like I'll just go around and think, oh, there's a high field there, so tell my child don't play in that area. But yeah, I think having somebody qualified who actually understands it would be better maybe than investing in one of these. But the radio frequency one's just useful for just radio frequency.
You can have 2 meters, which does, and that's what I do, and I know everything like what's going on.
Yeah.
I've got EHS and
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Their brains.
Yeah, thanks, Naomi. Great, thanks so much for this. A couple of things. Look, complicated question. Most of our melatonin is made by mitochondria, only about 85 to 10% of high yielding. So we need infrared from the sun, and of course we need the ultraviolet B for our vitamin D, which is more like the midday sun. Previous life I used to tell my patients, don't go up, after 10 or before 2. Exactly the wrong information. So the question would be, is there any technology available following on from Joe? Any technology available which might give us a sense of what the optimal natural sunlight exposure might be?
I know. I'm going to ask you. Tell me. So you said between 10, so it's good to go out between 10 and 2. I want to write this down, put it in my next presentation.
Well,
because I sunbathe then. I sunbathe every day. Is that a good time to sunbathe? Yeah.
I mean, either 5 or 10 minutes or half an hour, depending on how much melatonin you have in your skin. You need the ultraviolet B.
Yeah.
And then you also need the infrared. So there's all the stuff around skin cancer caused by excessive sun exposure. My own dad died from melatonin and Celtic background. So trying to find the balance of what's right for each individual in terms of sun exposure.
Yes.
Is there any technology of anyone?
No, I don't. Let's track it.
I'm going to, just because I can see them wanting to talk, so do you want to ask a question down there?
Yeah, are you familiar with the rice system?
Yes,
Right?
yes, frequency system.
My wife had ovarian cancer. My wife died in 2011, my first wife, right? And in 2009 she got diagnosed with ovarian cancer. I took her over to the radio clinic in Perth. They work on the right system.
Yeah.
A guy called John Holt was actually running he wasn't running it, but he was the original founder.
Yeah.
Now they run you through like a tunnel thing that emits 434 megahertz, right? And what it does, it actually damages the cancer cell to the point that your immune system recognises it, because a cancer cell has your natural DNA. A cancer cell has your natural DNA, right? Which means your white blood cells, they're called neutrophils. They don't recognise the cancer as a foreign body. Now, when you have radioactive or the right system, right, the FDA shut it down very quickly because there's no money in it. There's no drugs involved. Right? FDA shut it down in America in the 1940s. John Holt revived it, broke up, and Tony Abbott shut it down. Tony Abbott shut it down. I remember Mike Wilsey, back in those days, was a firm believer of it. He's seen the thing. Now, my wife, when we went there, they said, look, we don't have a good result with people that have had massive chemo, which she had. Most people exhaust the path going through chemo, and it doesn't work, and then they try the radiowave clinic as a last resort. But by that stage, you've got that much damage to your immune system that the radiowave clinic would struggle to get rid of the cancer. I saw 5 people over there that never had chemo, and they all got great results.
Amazing.
They all got great results. Now, I sat down, I actually invest in medical device companies and biotech, so I've been doing it for about 20 years, right? And I sat down with the people at the radioactive clinic, because I was concerned that 434 megahertz might damage something else. And they said to me, no, 434 megahertz only damages cancer cells. But they say, they were quite adamant to me. They said, in your body, there is a frequency that can damage just about any cell. You know, like 900 megahertz might damage red blood cells. 1,000 megahertz might damage white blood cells. Who knows? And as you say, they've done no research to back it up.
Yeah. Was there a question you wanted to ask, or just
Radio airplane doesn't exist anymore. And funny enough, when
just
I was
because I want to just open it up to other questions. Do you have a question that you wanted to ask Naomi, or just?
no, I wanted to know if she was aware of the right system.
I want to get one.
What's that?
I would like to get one. I've been looking into them for a while.
I wanted to know if she was aware of the right system and what, because this system actually damages the cancer cells.
Yeah, fantastic.
Right, and it is a specific frequency.
Yeah.
But I sat down and had about a 2-hour discussion with these people before Kathy had started the treatment, and they were quite upfront. They said, look, every cell in your body has a specific frequency that can damage it.
Yeah.
They were quite adamant about it.
Thank you for that information.
Could you go back a slide?
Yes.
I think it's just one slide.
Yeah.
And there's what looks like the one before that.
Yeah.
Is. I think it's one before. No, it's sorry.
That
Now, black plastic bucket.
Yeah.
You didn't make reference to that.
Yeah, that's the shielding paint. Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Naomi, you didn't mention LEDs.
Yes, LEDs, they're good. Yes.
Good?
Good, no, not good. No, because
I mean,
but good point.
Sorry, can I have everyone being quiet in the room so we can I have everyone being quiet in the room? There's too much conversation in here, so we can't pick up through the building.
Yeah.
They've got fluorescents.
I avoid using LED lights at home because of the flicker. So the flicker is supposed to have negative biological health effects, but you can get some LEDs that have been created without flicker. So bluelightblock.com.au, I think, sell them. They sell LED light bulbs that don't have flicker, low EMR emissions, and you can get them so that you can get basically a full spectrum for the day with blue light in it, because in daytime it's okay. They have a dusk setting and then a dawn setting. So there's like 2 types of orange light that you can have, so that you can have that as part of your circadian rhythm if you're indoors. So yeah.
I mean, the point is, we can't afford it. We've got to, it's in the street, it's in the shopping centre, it's in your house. So ways of mitigating it is really the best we can do.
Yes.
Short of wearing alfoil shirts and things like that. But is it worth thinking about, say, an alfoil sleeve for your phone?
Yes, so you could. I mean, the thing is, people have these protective things for their phone, but if the phone is on, it's like, what's the point? Because if it's on, you're waiting to get calls, you're waiting to get texts. So how much is it going to actually do? Like, you might as well have it off on flight mode with Bluetooth and Wi-Fi, and then just turn it on when you want to use it.
Now what does flight mode actually do?
So it basically, flight mode means then the 4G is turned off, or if people have 5G phones, the 3G, 4G, and the 5G is turned off, so you cannot receive anything when it's on flight mode. So it just is inactivating it. But obviously the point is that if the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth buttons are on in the settings, it's still giving off EMR. So it means you can't use it on flight mode, but then if you want to use it to receive a message, just flick it on. So it just means you might reduce your exposure by 50%.
Okay, so you reduce your capability of instant communication.
Yes, you do. Yeah, you do. Yeah, you do.
We've got another question down this young man down the back.
I'm not sure flight mode is meant. So say you're in an aeroplane, but it doesn't get interfered with the actual flight.
Yes, that's right. Because it's cutting it.
Sorry.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Hi. What evidence do you have for? I mean, solar technology's come a long way, and it's also in a lot of things, a lot of other. So you made the reference to dirty electricity. Yeah. What are you sort of using to give that information?
This is not based on any studies that I've read, but just on communicating with building biologists. who go into people's homes, they have a device they can plug into the circuitry, and then it can measure if there's any dirty electricity. So solar panels are known to create high levels of dirty electricity, but I don't know if I wouldn't know if specific brands have the differing levels and what they create. I wouldn't know. There might be worth looking at.
So I work in an industry that has to deal with electricity a lot as firefighting, and what my understanding is it's come a long way in terms of residual energy that's stored in solar panels, which now is converted into the inverter, which is then, so what the inverter does primarily is very important with regard to creating and using the energy efficiently for what it's doing, as opposed to maybe in the past. So it might, I'm really interested in that because I've got 36 of them on my roof. And
the inverter gives off some terrible stuff. The inverter's really dangerous as well. It's all solar panels above your home, really, really, really dangerous on so many levels. It's unbelievable. Unbelievable for your family. Right out in the paddock with nothing else around you to do its job and
oh, it'd be interesting to know a little bit more about that.
They're also run by smart meters now, so you've got a quadruple whammy of really radiation coming at you and your family all the time. That stuff.
The only way you know for sure is to meet with a.
Do you want to speak? Do you want to stand up and say something?
Are you a building
Yeah, I'm a building
biologist. What do you call yourself?
Building biologist.
Building biologist. So also you've got your cards.
Yes.
You've got your cards that you can give to people today as well.
Just in relation to the solar meter, the solar panels, it usually is the inverter that's sort of converting the DC electricity from the sun to AC, which is a usable form for your appliances and so on and so forth. So it's the inverter that creates that dirty electricity, but as for particular brands or newer models, I'm not sure. The only way to know for sure is to use the meter and measure it in gram steps a minute to measure the spikes of dirty electricity.
So what do you do if it's high in the dirty electricity?
There's filters that you can use. You just have to sort of play around with the circuitry, with the filters, and just keep measuring until you drop the levels to a manageable level.
We'll just do 2 more questions and have a break. So I've got one here. Sorry, so I'll do 3. I've got 1, 2, 3, and then you can also talk to Naomi during the break.
If you have a choice with your roof between tiles and colour-on, it would be more effective against electromagnetic fields.
Between tiles
and colour-on.
Oh, but what's that?
Tile goes for colour.
I just thought they were all called tiles.
Tin roof.
Tin. Oh, yes, because you have a lot of that tin over here. Don't have that in England. I don't know. I mean, I would think not have tin, but what does the building biologist say?
Well, look, it depends. I mean, if you've got a lot of radio frequency going on inside the house, then having a metal roof is not what you want because it's going to bounce off the roof and come back down. But if you're trying to mitigate against external radio frequency, then the metal roof is actually quite useful as a reflecting material. So it sort of depends on what's going on in the house and what's going on externally as well.
So you need to say that, what, tiles?
Look, to be honest, as a building biologist, I generally recommend tiles because I don't just deal with EMF, I deal with mould and condensation and moisture issues as well. So as a general rule, I find that houses with tiles are probably better because they breathe more, so you don't have as many condensation issues. But from an EMF perspective or EMR perspective, metal roofs do have a place with regards to reflecting. So if you've got a tower or external radio frequency close by, then the metal roof will act as a reflecting material, which will provide some protection for the house. But if you've got modems and phones and everything going on inside the house, then,
which everybody does.
Yeah, which everybody does. Then it's really, then the metal roof is just going to act as a material to keep the radio frequency inside the house. So, yeah.
All right, we'll move on to this.
Does the size of the appliance or smart
gadget reflect the amount of EMF that it's giving off, like a TV versus a smartphone?
Sorry, I didn't hear that one.
Sorry, gosh, no. She says it's the size of the device. Yeah. I'm going to ask my expert.
Sorry, could you
Does
repeat
the
that?
size of the device give off more, so like a smart TV versus an iPhone?
No, it doesn't, not at all. Every device on a standalone basis will give off different levels of radio frequency. So in my experience, a mobile phone will give off a lot higher radio frequency than a huge Apple TV, but it honestly just depends from brand to brand, device to device. So, and the only way you can know is to measure it with a meter.
Yeah.
And last question over here.
Does anyone have one last question? Maybe I'm just behind, because we're sort of dealing already with existing 5G. Is there any movement against 5G? Because in a way we're sort of adjusting to this evil, which is coming to us anyway.
Yeah.
Are there any people who are organized to completely destroy it?
I mean, there's been groups. What was the question? Are there any groups that are working to stop 5G? So yes, I mean basically since 2019, Steve started the Australians for Safe Tech group a long time ago, but there was like this massive awareness movement in 2019, and that has grown as well over the last few years. So many people are, there are many people globally who are very concerned about it.
Because it is such a risk to health.
Yeah.
They put a tower over near America and they put a small sign to say that they were putting it up. So I rang the company and they had no idea what the health. But then they said, oh, it's approved by the government anyhow. You got no say, you can say that.
Yes. We could. We'll just finish with you, young man.
Can you make like 5G phones 4G?
Yes, you can. And you can make 4G phones 3G as well. You can go into your settings and you can do that. Yes.
3G as well.
And you can make 5G phones 3G until they turn off the 3G. But
We need to finish. We do need to finish now. We're just going to have a break. We'll have a break for 10 minutes and then we'll come back for Steve's talk. So thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Awesome. Yeah, that's really good.